with it, with its young, tough but vulnerable protagonist, and with the author himself. And along with the rest of that little world I'd been immersed in these last 10 years, I couldn't help wondering where his second novel was. Surely, though, the fact that he's here is a favorable sign that it's only a matter of time before the long-awaited second novel is born out of the incubator of silence that is Bosco. "It's too quiet," Nat says, now taking a sip of the single malt scotch that the director, Diana Tate, sets out each night in a cut glass decanter. David Fox, a landscape architect who I've heard is writing a report on the gardens for the Garden Conservancy, holds up a Waterford tumbler of the stuff, the gold liquor catching a last ray of light as the sun impales itself on the tips of the pines at the western edge of the estate, and proposes a toast to Aurora Latham's Sacro Bosco, a sacred wood indeed. "Is that what the name means?" asks one of the painters who've just joined us on the terrace. "I thought it was a funny name for an artist colony. Isn't it some kind of chocolate milk housewives made in the 50s? The other artists, who are just now straggling in from their outlying studios and cabins like laborers returning from the fields, laugh at their cohort's joke and grouse that the writers, as usual, have taken all the good chairs, leaving them the cold stone balustrade. One can't help but notice that there's a class system here at Bosco. The writers, who stay in the mansion, play the role of landed gentry. Nat Loomis and Bethesda Graham somehow managed to make their identical outfits of black jeans and white t-shirts look like some kind of arcane English hunting wardrobe. Even unassuming Zalman Bronsky, in his rumpled linen trousers and yellowed, uncuffed and untucked dress shirt, looks like the eccentric uncle in a Chekhov play. "She named it after the Sacro Bosco garden in Bomarzo, near Rome," I say, my first spoken words of the day. I'm surprised my vocal cords still work, but after all, my book, my first novel, is set here at Bosco, which is why I know that the estate isn't named for a bedtime beverage. I address my remarks to David Fox, though, because the other writers, especially Bethesda Graham and Nat Loomis, still scare me. "Just remember," the director told me on the first day, "never call Nat Nathaniel or Bethesda Beth." I smiled at that evidence of vanity on their parts, but then I remembered that I'd been quick enough to modify my own name to Ellis when I published my first story. After all, who would take seriously a writer called Ellie? "She saw it on one of the trips she and Milo Latham took to Italy," I add, "and was inspired to create her own version of an Italian Renaissance garden here on the banks of the Hudson." We all look south toward where the Hudson should be, but the towering pines obscure the view. Instead, we are looking down on crumbling marble terraces and broken statuary, statues of the Muses, whose shoulders are mantled with the gold dust of decaying pine needles, and whose faces, at least on the statues who still have their heads, are cloaked in shadow and green moss. The hedges and shrubbery, once clipped and ordered, have overgrown their neat geometry and now sprawl in an untidy thicket across the hill. The fountain allée, with its satyrs and sphinxes, who once spouted water from their mouths and breasts, leads to a statue of a horse, poised on the edge of the hill as if it were about to leap into the dark, overgrown boxwood maze. Aurora Latham's Giardino Segreto at the bottom of the hill. Somewhere at the center of the maze is a fountain, but the hedges have grown too high to see it now. "Actually, the garden's closer in design to the Villa d'Este at Tivoli," Bethesda Graham murmurs, sipping her mineral water. "The idea of all these fountains and the springs running down the hill into a grotto, and then out to the main fountain, and from there to the river, and finally to the sea. Aurora wrote in her Italian journal that she wanted to create a garden that was the wellspring of a fountain, like the sacred spring on Mount Parnassus." Bethesda pronounces Aurora's name as if she were a contemporary, who'd only moments ago quit the terrace. Of course, I remember she's writing a biography of Aurora Latham. Bethesda's the expert here. "The whole hill is a fountain," David Fox says. "One might even say the entire estate. Pumps draw the water up from the spring at the bottom of the hill, and then pipes funnel the water down the hill through 100 channels. On a night like this, we would have heard the water cascading down the terraces like 1,000 voices." Zalman Bronsky murmurs something. I lean forward to ask him to repeat himself, but then the words half heard and still lingering in Bosco's